Welcome to week 8. I hope you had a relaxing and refreshing spring break. Let's get right into what you're going to be doing this week. We got two separate videos, the one you're watching now, and there will be another one in assignments for your feature story, the profile that you'll be writing. But let's first get into just the outline for this week. I'm also going to spend some time in this video talking a little bit about the hard news story, some general feedback I saw across the board, and will help you out moving forward. And also wanted to briefly touch on a couple points from the media law chapter that we had with your assignment about the senator and actual malice, and just wanted to make sure, because I saw a little bit of confusion there, which is natural. It's a very tough subject to understand, so we'll just talk a little bit about that. First, let's just start with the outline for this week. Read chapter 17, but you only have to read pages 322 to 333. Not many pages. It's just going to be focusing on profile stories specifically. You can watch the entire chapter, especially if you are interested in some of the other aspects that they're going to be talking about. But last week you started with storytelling, feature writing, or I should say before the spring break, storytelling, narrative writing, features, and profile stories are under that umbrella. It's a specific type of feature story. So you're going to be focusing on what makes a good profile story. And you read one in a way when you read the Klan's member having the Muslim over for dinner, right? That was a profile really on, I believe his name was Chris Buckley, on the former Klan's member, right? So that is the idea of a profile story. That was a little bit of a mix too of a feature narrative, but it was really focusing on him as a person. It's a profile story. That's what you're going to be learning about this week. You will then take the quiz, chapters 10 and 17. 10 was the one you read before the break and you did the exercise on. 17 is this week, but it's only those 10 pages. You're going to begin your feature story. You'll have a few weeks, just like you did for your hard news story. That video will be in assignments. And of course, read news every day. And now you can start to, even when you read news, start to try to compartmentalize, right? And say, oh, this story fits in a hard news story because it has X, Y, Z characteristics. This story looks more like a feature story, maybe even specifically a profile story because it has ABC characteristics. So now you're probably at the point of the semester where not only are you seeing technique and style in news stories, but you're also able to figure out, well, what kind of a news story is it? Why is that news story? Why is that newsworthy? How does that maybe fit into a larger media ecosystem like narrative, right? Like why are some stories hard news stories, but then they need to have these profile stories or these feature stories, as part of that broad topic. You're starting to kind of just maybe start to piece it together, and that would be great if that's the awareness you have as you start to consume media. All right, as promised, I also want to talk a little bit about your hard news story and talk about media law. So let's start with the hard news stories. I gave you all specific feedback, but I did see a couple of issues pop up on, in a few different students. So if it's happening more than once, I want to make sure that we give the guidance. And maybe if you didn't even make this mistake this time, you would make it in a future story. So let's all make sure that we're all on the same page moving forward. Let's start with leads. So remember, leads are one sentence and it's its own paragraph. So your first paragraph of your news story should just be one sentence. Now, a hard news story lead and the type that you're going to write for your profile story are going to be different. You've learned that from the book already, but still try to get it to one sentence, even for, well, definitely for hard news stories, right? Definitely for a hard news story, one sentence lead. But even with these profile stories, with the feature story, you have a little bit more wiggle room, but for this class, just to get the fundamentals, get it to one sentence. It should be one sentence that's sharp, that brings the reader in. And you don't want to, if you have 3-4 sentences, well, you shouldn't even really have 4 sentences in your paragraphs anyways, but even if you have 2-3 sentences, it's a lot for somebody to process. People are kind of just skimming to begin. Give them that one bold sentence that's a standalone paragraph. Have that white space above and below it, so it just stands alone. And it's enough to make the person hook them in, right? To bring them in. If you bury that information in 2 sentences, 3 sentences, they might never read on. So that's why you're going to start learning fundamentals here. One sentence lead. I know you're going to be shifting right now to profile story, to your feature story. I know we're backtracking a little bit, but this is real. The advice I'm giving now, or not the advice, the guidance I'm giving now really focuses more on hard news stories. So just keep that in mind. But you may end up writing another one for your final project. So it's good to get these lessons and have them stick. So you wrote your lead. Next, paragraph is your nut graph. And most of you did a pretty good job with your nut graph for the most part, as in you encapsulated the story. You gave it in a nutshell. Some of you, though, did it more like chronological, and so you're talking about the event. You know, your lead is someone is doing something somewhere. Then the nut graph was, the event started with blah 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 blah. Then the event did blah 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 blah, and then the ending. Remember, a hard news story, you should be able to have the whole general gist of the story, the main key principles of what happened within the first 2, maybe 3 paragraphs. That means you're not going in chronological order. That second paragraph should be, these were the highlights from the event. Now, you're not going to say that, but that's how the paragraph should be. That should be your mindset. These are the key moments from the event. This is what you need to know from the event. This is the big thing that happened at the event. That is in the nut graph. And then you can start to backtrack with the rest, right? But that nut graph has to be, hey, I read that lead, I read that nut graph, I know what basically happened at the event. And I'll just give a quick, example, because many of you did a sports game, which is a good example for this. You should not be, your lead is so-and-so is playing, then the nut graph, here's what happened in the first quarter, here's what happened in the second quarter. The nut graph should be, here's so-and-so is playing and here's why it matters, whatever. Nut graph, here's who won, here's a big thing that happened in it, here was maybe the star player and how they took over the game. Yes, you give who won the game. Don't make them wait to the end. Remember, this is not an essay. This is a hard news story where you are trying to get the inverted pyramid, like we learned from the book. You are getting the main important details right from the start. And so apply that now to, even if it's not a sports story, it's some other event, something that happened, you're still with that same mindset, right? You're getting the key information from the top, and then you can start revealing the rest. So you got your lead, you got your nut graph. Within there, you've already probably encapsulated the story. Sometimes you have another paragraph or in addition to your nut graph, okay, you can do that too. But really then the structure becomes next paragraph, your lead quote. Your lead quote is a key quote, one of the most important quotes that gives that story that spice. That's the structure. Then after your lead quote, then you start going into the background information. That's where you can start revealing more of the details, getting a little bit more lengthy and windy about, long-winded about what happened at the event. And then, as you go down in the inverted pyramid, those details become less and less important. So if you cut off the bottom or worked your way up, it does not really matter as much. You still understand the core of the story. And so I did see a lot of people struggle with that. Leads, getting that one sentence hook that gave enough information so you understand the story, but didn't, you gave the who, what, when, where, why, how. You don't have to give all of those, remember that. But you gave that basic information. So you have that lead, but it's 2 or 3 sentences. Then your nut graph was more the beginning of the story. Then near the end of the story comes a quote. It was just the order was all jumbled up. So that's what I mean by story structure, especially if you're one of those people that I wrote that. Think about your story structure. Something else, now I'm on leads, something else to think about with leads. This is where it gets tricky. Your book does a good job explaining this, but I'll also articulate it for you. You're walking that fine line of getting too detailed, or I should say, you don't want to be too detailed, and you don't want to be too broad, right? So too detailed. Well, one key example is, unless it is a person of prominence, celebrity, a public figure, you're not going to put names in the lead, right? You don't need to put a name in the lead. You're saying, you're using other qualifiers. A man did X, Y, and Z. A professor was blah, blah, blah. A police officer, blah, 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 right? Excuse me. Oh, that was unattractive, I know, but I had to do it. So, in that lead there, you're not getting too specific with the details. I'm going to do it again. And I don't have any water by me, but I think that's the last one. You're not getting too specific with the details, right? You're going to be saying more of qualifiers. However, you're also not going to be too broad either. You're not going to say something like, a man had something happen to him today, right? Or you actually wouldn't be writing in the present. That's another thing, always in past tense. So a man had something happen to him at the bus stop. That's way too broad, way too broad. Meet somewhere in between, right? Maybe it's, and I got to think of a quick story on my top of my head, but a man was unexpectedly thrown off guard when a bus ran over his foot as he was waiting to get picked up to go see his mom. Oh man, that was horrible. I was trying to think of a story on my head, but you get the idea. Yeah, within that sentence, we don't need to know this person's name, but we have to know what happened to him. A bus ran over the guy's foot. Now we go into the nut graph. Now I'm gonna have to continue on with this story. When the bus ran over his foot when he accidentally stepped in front of the bus before it came to a complete stop. Paramedics rushed immediately. Bones were broken, but he is going to be fine and he's recovering in the hospital. Right now, you learn a little bit more. So I know it's a big recap of everything that we've been talking about up until this point, but just again, I think maybe hearing a few more examples is helping you maybe now understand where, if you struggle with this, where your story structure went off, right? And why it's important to have a lead that covers enough to make the person understand the story and why they should read, but not too much where you bog them down with too many details, right? It's just like too much to process, and they're having a hard time figuring out which facts matter to them or not. All right, I'm going to now pivot and also just quickly talk about media law. A lot of confusion with the senator. If you can try to remember back, the senator is being alleged of sexual harassment by different staffers. Would you publish it? First of all, yes, you are protected to publish it. You do not need, this was something I saw pop up a few times, you do not need hard documentation like a court case or a police arrest to publish something like that. Remember, actual malice, and actual malice really applies to public officials. So there's a different standard between the everyday person, you and me, and someone who is celebrity, right? Celebrity, when I'm saying celebrity, it does not have to be Kim Kardashian. It has to be celebrity as in like a prominent figure, well-known. And there's some gray areas there, but that I digress. So actual malice applies to people that are well-known. Senator is well-known. It's a public person, right? So the bar is much higher for him or her, but in this case it was him, to sue for libel. So first of all, they have a higher bar. Oh, sorry, I don't know what just happened there. All right, hopefully this is all still recording. All right, well, I'll check. Hopefully this is all recording. If you saw the whole screen go black and things happen, I don't know why I did that, but hopefully we're in good shape right now. So let me just continue very quickly. Actual malice, that he's a public official, right? So it's a harder bar to reach, first of all, for him to sue. So secondly, where does negligence, reckless disregard for the truth, where does that all come in? Well, in this case, this is what it would be. Someone comes and says, hey, I'm a staffer for this person. He sexually harassed me. Here's my story. And you, without the reporter, without doing anything else, just takes it word for word, publishes it, and says, okay, it's out. And then it's false, right? That's reckless disregard for the truth. You as a reporter did nothing to at least even try to see, could there be something credible here? What could you have done? Well, one example would be, well, first they say they're a staffer. You go call, look up, make sure that they did work in his office at some point. There's some public records that show, yes, they worked in their office. Okay, that's something you try to do. Maybe in part of their story, she says, we went on a cruise or something like that, on these dates. And you look up to see if the senator was in the state or not at that time. Maybe that's provable. Maybe he was at some event that day that she claims, right? Well, now there could be something wrong with that story. So you're taking those steps. That is your level as a reporter. You have to at least make sure that it is credible. Of course, you don't have to publish a story either. It's up your discretion as the editor. But you have at least made those attempts to see, could there be some credibility here? In this case, there's 5 different reporters. You verify that they were staffers, all have similar stories. Actually, I don't remember if that was the similar stories was part of the description, but it's multiple allegations from confirmed staffers here. And if you can confirm that, then you can run that, right? Of course, it's always good to try to get a quote on the other end, to try to contact the person to get their side of the story. As a reporter, we learned about being objective and trying to get that. You're not saying this person is guilty, right? You were saying here is a credible allegation from different different staffers. And maybe they were, maybe they are, right? Maybe it is incorrect. But even if it is, you are protected as a journalistic outlet that you tried your best to show the credibility. Some will say, well, that's not fair because there's no proof. You need to bring proof. But remember, that's how we had a lot of the Me Too revelations, right? There wasn't a smoking gun. That's like in Hollywood, where there's a smoking gun and everybody can just point. Usually, and you can learn, you know this from the law, most cases aren't settled with a smoking gun. It's, it's different not viewpoints isn't the right word, but it's different, testimony. It's people that are, I'm trying to remember there's an actual word for it, but it's like, I'm trying to blank here. But it's like evidence that isn't necessarily right in front of your face, right? It's like secondary evidence. That is what this really is. So when you're looking here and you're saying that well, there's no actual proof of documentation, you don't need it. Just like a lot of those other Me Too cases, there wasn't necessarily one thing that somebody could point to say, this is why you need to publish a story because I have this arrest file on this person. It was a story that was brought forward and then more reporting to figure out, did others come forward and say that, was there any other evidence somewhere else that shows that, that this was a reoccurring pattern, right? And so that's my long way of saying what I noticed from a lot of people say, no, you can't do it because there was no proof. You don't necessarily need to have proof. What you do need to have is evidence that at least what the person has told you as far as credentials or knowing the person or, that there's some legs to stand on. And if you do that, then you are protected. You still may not run the story because you may not think there was enough there. That's your prerogative as a journalist, as an editor. You may not run the story because you do want to see something, but the whole point is you are protected to run it if you feel that there is, if you feel as a reporter that the person is, coming in with truthful, and you cannot be, you won't, you're protected, from libel lawsuits. All right. All right. That was hard. I know. Let's start. That's a lot. It's very dense information. Hopefully that was at least cleared it up for some of you that maybe were unsure from before. All right, lastly, now that we've gone through the recap here, we've gone through what you're doing this week, you do have one more video to watch, which will be your profile story, and I'll go over your assignment there. But hey, we're past spring break, which means the second half of this now, you'll be picking up momentum. Before you know it, we'll be enjoying the nice weather, and you will be off on summer vacation. So keep at it, more than halfway there, and we're going to end real strong.